Learning how to flare the aircraft right before landing will not only make your landings more realistic, but if you are someone who makes flight simulator videos for YouTube, will also increase the realism aspect of your videos. When it comes to flaring, there's many techniques that are seen on the internet that are simply pretty bad, and there's a few techniques that are a little more decent. And the one you just saw was in the decent category. It wasn't great, but it was better than average. And today we're going to look at some bad and also somewhat better examples of flaring. To begin with, one of the most common mistakes with flaring is that the pilot will decide to flare the aircraft while the aircraft is still on approach. As you can imagine, this is something that is not good for the aircraft in terms of its ability to pretty much fly the approach. When the aircraft is up at an angle like this, you set yourself up for stalling, which we will see shortly. Stalling is very dangerous because you don't have much time to react, especially at this altitude and speed. And by stalling, the aircraft will simply fall out of the sky, as you can see in this case. So again, don't flare while on approach. Another issue that is seen often is the aircraft will come in too fast. When this happens and a pilot attempts to flare the aircraft will simply either hold its altitude or slightly gain altitude. In this example, the aircraft is going too fast for landing, and also the pilot flared the aircraft while the aircraft is still too high above the runway. This offers too many challenges to really describe, but the major challenge is that the aircraft will glide down the runway too far and cause the aircraft to potentially run off the end of the runway. That's a big problem, as you can imagine. In the next few examples, we take a look at the Cessna154 and some problems with flaring once again. As the aircraft approaches the runway, the pilot will slowly pull back on the controls too early. Now, this is seen more with propeller aircraft because sometimes the pilot does not realize how touchy the controls are. They're very responsive. And as the pilot continues to try to flare the aircraft too early in hopes of dropping the aircraft quickly, you'll see a stall occur. So again, don't be too touchy with the controls. They will respond quickly, just give the aircraft time to touch down. In this next example, we'll see that a pilot will try to pull back on the controls too dramatically during the flare process. Now remember, the controls are responsive, and just give the aircraft time to respond. Don't overemphasize your control inputs because you'll only find yourself in a situation like this where you pretty much lose control. Now when it comes to regional jets, such as the CRJ you see on your screen right now, please remember that the aircraft does not need to flare at a very high degree. Now we see this quite often with the MD-80s or DC-9, which have engines in the rear of the aircraft. Please remember that the flaring does not need to be 15 to 25 degrees as seen in some videos. When you're flying from inside the virtual cockpit, you'll need to learn how to use your depth perception to accurately determine how high you are from touching down on the runway. This is done through a lot of practice because each aircraft is different, and your perception will be different in each aircraft's virtual cockpit. If you find yourself not being able to understand the depth perception issues, you will not only flare too early, but likely flare to the point where the aircraft will pitch up, gain altitude, and be forced to go around. So again, practice is key here with the situation. When it comes to flaring the aircraft in a more realistic manner, you'll see that the flare is very slight. It is only a few degrees up. This allows the aircraft to increase its lift slightly before touching down, which makes the entire landing process smooth. I'm sure there's a few of the viewers who wish I would go into more detail of this entire flaring process, but I want this video to be an overview of the entire procedure. So if you want to add in your comments regarding advanced techniques and numbers involved with this flaring technique, please do so in the comment section. To review, flaring on approach is a bad idea. It's only going to lead to problems such as stalling or gaining altitude and being forced to go around. You should really not have the aircraft in a nose-up altitude like this while you're still on approach for landing. When it comes to touching down, please realize that you do not need to flare as high as seen in this video. Doing so will only cause the aircraft to glide down the runway further. While the landing might be smoother than usual, you're setting yourself up for a pretty dramatic stop. Next, we're going to take a look at some landings that included flare techniques that were decent, but I must emphasize they're not perfect. The video is not about being perfect, it's about improving your skill. So for a viewer challenge, I guess you could post a video response of your flaring technique. Again, it's not so much about landing perfectly smooth, it's just about learning how to flare at the proper angle and learning how that flaring too early can cause problems, flaring too late will lead to damage to the gear most likely. And if you're looking for more guidance on how to do this more realistically, I recommend checking out real-world aviation videos. Those can offer not only the best perspective, but obviously if the pros do it that way, most likely it's the best way to do it in Flight Simulator. And it's all about learning, and hopefully you learned a little bit today about flaring. I try to keep this video in an overview sense and not so specific because I understand the viewers have a different range of knowledge, and sometimes it's easier to keep it simple, stupid. So until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.